Counselor Accents Podcast. Two school counselors who love their jobs. Oh, and they happen to have Southern accents too. Bless their hearts.
I'm Laura Rankhorn.
And I'm Kim Crumley.
And together we are
Counselor Accents.
So Kim, we are recording this. We don't usually do this, but we are recording this intro posthumously. You know, I can't say that word, but and actually it means something incredibly different. So let's scratch that. We're recording this intro after we have already recorded the podcast episode. And we never do that. Usually we go right in and, you know, it's done before. But we just ran out of time this afternoon. We couldn't do it. I at one point thought that I was going to have to do this episode by myself, that you weren't going to make it on. And I thought, oh, well, it's okay. So I'm going to read the bio of our guest, and then I'm going to let you talk. Okay.
Okay.
So this is Cassie Stephens, and she is an art teacher. So this is her bio. After spending entirely too long at Indiana University, getting her degree in both painting and art education, Cassie Stephens did her student teaching in the magical land of Ireland. While she was away, her parents, fully aware of her slacker ways, sent out 52 art teacherin job applications to such faraway places as Alaska. One such place that called her for an interview was Nashville, Tennessee. On a whim, she loaded up her jean jumpers, resume, and chain-smoking grandma to make the trip to Nashville, where she landed her first teaching gig. Okay, I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to say that when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, she is our people.
She is a soulmate to us.
Yes.
She's not even trying to hide it. It's just, this is who I am, and I love that.
Fast forward nearly 15 years, and Cassie had settled down with her husband and their 3 cats. Sadly, she'd fallen into an art teacherin slump, rehashing stale art lessons, still wearing those sad jean jumpers and doing little creating of her own. It was then that she decided to create a blog that might help her snap out of her funk. She'll be sharing more about that here in a moment. Zip forward once more to the present. These days, you can find Cassie teaching in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. She's written 2 books filled with sewing and clay crafts for kids and art teachers alike. You can also take a listen to her podcast where she shares all things life and art teacherin. And she's written a book, Art Teacherin 101, which is how I found her. So, Kim, I told you all of this. I said, we've got an art teacher. She's going to share classroom management techniques. Her name is Cassie Stephens. I gave you all the information. And then we start recording. Cassie comes on. And I saw it on your face. Like I
thought, like, this is not who I think it is. This is Cassie Stephens. I don't know how many there are out there, but I never dreamed it would be the person, my crush. This is my educator crush. This is the educator I want to be. And you know, as I say in the podcast, there are so few people that I take time to follow. That's just not what I do. I want to be the person that does that. But she entertains the heck out of me. And I have immolated her. That's a word. Posthumously is not. I mean, I listen to her and I want to be her. But hello, my most amazing friends. I know that doesn't sound like her, but if you watch her, you just get drawn into these. She is so creative, but I think she's going to bring out in this podcast that we all have that creativity. And I think especially the word for this post-pandemic burnout teacher world that we're living in is she is going to talk about bringing her passion and lining up that beside parallel to her teaching, and how when we do that, it can heal us from the burnout that we may be feeling. It's what you and I did when we started creating together. Yeah. And one of the things that we came out of that was this podcast, among other things. But I think sometimes we give all that we have to our students. And as she says, you know, when a vessel's empty, it's empty. And so we started filling each other up with that, you know, creativity and allowing ourselves to be ourselves. And I think one of the things that we stopped doing was caring what other people think too. And I think she's going to bring that out too, that we're just going to do us and we're going to just go for it. And I think that's when great creative things happen. And I love this podcast.
Well, I reached out to her because, and it's like I say in the episode, we have such little training as school counselors. If some school counselors are teachers first, but some of us are not. I am one of them. And I was never a classroom teacher. So I never had classroom management skills. We touched on it one night in my classes, but there was a reason why they didn't teach us classroom management. It's because my favorite professor talked about how this is not the only part of your job. And so they were very intentional with why they didn't teach us how to manage a classroom, I guess. But anyway, all that to say, we need classroom management techniques. And so that's why I reached out to Cassie Stephens, because the art teacher at my school has had such great success from her book and the techniques that she's tried. So I thought, well, let's get her on. And but in this episode,
don't let the art part,
Yeah.
art teacher part, because I think I have learned more from her, watching her and how she interacts with students more than I have anybody else, as far as management, as far as engaging, as far as keeping kids' attention, even the lessons that she does that you can bring in the SEL and your standards into some of those lessons.
well, and the benefit we have having listened or having just recorded this episode with her, I know that this episode brings out so much more than classroom management. This is the shot in the arm that we all needed. It is going to inspire you. It's so much more than just classroom management, which is hugely important. But my word, Cassie Stephens has a gift. And I am so excited for our listeners, and I don't want to waste another minute. So let's listen. So we have just had this whole conversation, and I feel like we need to let our audience in on the dysfunction between you and me and why this relationship between you and me is so hard for me to work with, because I have told you who our guest was. I've talked to you about the book that she wrote. I've given you as much information as I could possibly give.
All of her management, and I know all of her management, because there's nothing she puts out that I do not watch.
Okay.
But
well,
you're right.
I'll tell you what you don't watch, and that's your emails. Because if you had been checking your emails, you would know that she and I are basically best friends now, and you're out and she's in. So, oh my goodness. So I wish that our audience had known your reaction whenever she came on and you realized who we're actually talking to today.
You could have done this for my birthday. You could have said, this is your Christmas present. I am grinning from ear to ear. It's just like you are up there with like Gary Brooks. And I mean, you're a big time player in the whole world of education. And if our school counselors are not aware of all the things, this is going to be such a great introduction, because you work for all educators. All educators. It doesn't matter what your field is art. It doesn't matter. When I watch you with students, it is magical. I mean magical. And so I follow you, and that's it. Laura can tell you that's the truth. I just am the least social media person, but I could cry. I literally am your biggest fan. I could cry. I talk about you all the time with Laura, and I really wasn't listening to her. So this is the greatest. Maybe God knew I just needed this today, this great surprise. So I don't know what to do besides gush, other than to say you are brilliant. You are the greatest classroom manager I've ever seen. Your wardrobe alone blows me away. Everything that you do is extra mile, and to me, you are the picture of the greatest educator.
I don't know about that.
No, seriously, Laura. No, this is not me, is it, Laura?
No.
I don't go, because we've had everybody on here, but you are the real deal. This is the real deal, and it's not that our other guests aren't, but I have watched you in action. I'm literally 2 hours away. Anytime that I can come and visit you, please let me. Do people come to visit you?
Yeah, people are, I mean, now that we're kind of back in school and things are normal-ish, I've had several people reach out, and I'm more than willing to let people come and join. But of course, just like anything, you get to see the real peek behind the curtain, which means you when classes don't go off without a hitch or when a lesson bombs. And I think that's more important sometimes for people to see, because then they see how you kind of navigate through a situation like that. And then also that it happens to everybody, because the thing with social media is it can really make you feel like, what do they call it? Imposter syndrome, because most of us are sharing the highlight reel, And so that's what you think it's always like. And trust me, in here, there's a lot of like poo-poo that hits the fan, so to speak, and it happens multiple times even within a lesson. So it's good for people to know that and see that. I guess I should probably share that some more, but that might get me fired. I don't know.
No, and I know what you mean. And we've had people who've asked to come intern with us or to watch us. And I feel the same way. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen that day. You just don't know what's going to happen with students or whatever. So, but a lot of people have their eyes on you. And I just see that star continuing to rise. And I cannot imagine. I've thought often about Franklin having you as a gym. I'm just at this gym. So I'm still gushing, and I'm sorry. And Clanton, my little boy, I will send him links to you just about every week. So he doesn't know you're on here, but he watches you, and he's able to do some of the things that you have, you've put out there. So I'm so excited.
Kim, I totally can relate though to the email thing, because I believe y'all reached out to me it was a little while ago, and I didn't respond really quickly, but that's the account that I actually do check. So my school email account, I just don't. My team, my specials team, like the music teacher, my PE friends, they'll print out an email and bring it to me like, okay, this is one that you definitely need to know about. Because I'm the worst. But ignorance is sometimes bliss.
In this case, it is faculty, because I would have been a nervous wreck all day. So I'm just so glad that I didn't know. But I am so excited to introduce you to the school counseling world, because I feel like your lessons in art, I have used your lessons when you did the mask lesson. Mm-hmm. That was what's behind this mask, and I was able then to go in and use that with students. It was just, and I'm like, school counselors need to know about you. So I would never have dreamt that we would have gotten you, and we did. So
yeah, I'm happy to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I told you in the email that you did read, and I appreciate that, that the art teacher at my school found you because she and I share classes. So when I do classes, I go in and use her art room, and I take that week of classes for her. So she and I, like school counselors, I don't know, most of us do not have classroom management training. They just don't cover that in school counseling school. So it's an area where, we do classes, but we're looking around like, what do I do with all these kids? And they're not sitting in rows, and they're not doing the things that we did back in the 80s that, you think kids do. So we're at a loss sometimes. And so she told me, hey, I found this book and it has changed my life. And so she has been showing me some of the techniques that you have talked about in the book. So I think let's start there. Kim, is that okay with you to start there? Because
Absolutely.
Okay.
I already know everything. I already know it all. You have no idea how much I follow her and know what she's doing. But her techniques are incredible, and I use them, so I know they work. But yes, let's go ahead with our techniques.
Yeah. Well, when I first started teaching, and that was in 1998, so I had no clue, because we did get some classroom management. I think we took a class. I mean, it was like a million years ago. I don't even remember what I took. And honestly, I had this dream that I was going to become a painter, which then I was like, well, I don't really have to listen to these art ed classes because I'm just here for the grade and to get the certificate, but I'm not really going to do this. So I was probably the worst art education student. that there ever was. So if we were taught classroom management techniques, that went in one ear and out the other. But when I got hired, that first day when I had an hour-long art class with a group of second graders, and all I had planned was to kind of cover my rules, because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. You talk about the rules, you talk about the consequences, and then that's your first day. I ran through all of that. And I remember when I was done, I looked at the clock and I'd only spoke for 10 minutes. I had another 50 minutes to fill. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I thought, I'm going to open up the floor Oprah style and be like, anybody have any questions? Which just exploded into mass chaos. Why does your hair look like that? Where is the other art teacher? What are we going to do? Are we just going to listen to you talk? Like, quickly, I learned real fast. I have got to learn classroom management, because that was like the longest, worst hour. But I can still relive minute by minute. You know how it is. Like your first year teaching. I always tell first year teachers, get a journal and write in it every day. Write all the funny stuff down, write all the difficult stuff down, because you're going to cherish all those memories and you're going to learn so much. That's like the biggest leap of how much knowledge you're going to gain. But one thing I learned about myself as an educator, because the next thing I did was I went to classroom teachers to see what they were doing, as far as management goes, because I was the only art teacher in my school. And in 1998, you didn't go onto Facebook and post questions to your art teacher group and say, hey, besties, what do I do with this group of kids? Yeah. So you had to reach out to the resources that were at hand, which for me were classroom teachers. And, each one had a different style and a different method. And some of them looked really cute, their methods, and had a lot of visuals and a lot of stimulating things to go with them. And I thought that I would try to adopt that. But what I learned was I like things very, very simple, because if it is simple, then I can be consistent with it. If it's complicated, if it has a lot of layers to it, move this clip, you get this thing, you get this treat, you get this reward. I can't keep up with it. And on top of it, try to teach art. And now I have art class for 30 minutes. So kindergarten through fourth grade is what I teach, 30-minute art classes. I don't want to use a lot of my time with the bells and whistles. I want to be able to get them ready to go with classroom management that's quick and easy, and that's quick and easy for them to understand. So my go-to thing that I always recommend is just getting yourself a dry erase board or using your dry erase board, and you can draw a happy and a sad face on your board. Or for me, I happen to have 2 happy face magnets, and one I just drew a diagonal line through so that the kids would know that's the not happy face. And I just have them on a dry erase board. And when the kids walk in quietly, quickly, they sit in their spot, they're ready to learn, I just start throwing out the praise like confetti. Oh, first row, you're doing great. I really love how so-and-so's sitting. Look at you guys ready to get started. And I just draw lines, little tally marks underneath the happy face. And then if I see somebody who's maybe talking as they're walking in, or, rolling around on the floor, whatever it is the kids do, I don't call the child out, but I'll just say, oh, I hear somebody talking. Just a reminder, that's not how we walk in. And I'll just draw a line under the sad face. It's quick, it's easy, it's visual. I have a lot of ESL kids. They get it. And I have a counselor friend in my school who was a second grade teacher for years. And now this year is her first year as a counselor. And after her first class, it was a difficult class. She came in and was sharing with my specials team and I. She's like, you guys, I don't know what to do. I'm used to disciplining a class that's my own, but I see these guys for a minute and then they're gone. Like, how do you do that? So I said, happy sad board. She did it and it's been going great. So I can't recommend it enough because it's so stinking simple. And and for the longest time, what I would usually do is if we had a lot of tally marks under the happy and not so many under the sad, when the teacher picked them up, I would say, okay, we had a really great day. We had a lot of things that made us happy or made me happy that they did. And then if we had more more tally marks under the sad, I would just let the teacher know, well, it looks like we need to work a little bit more on X, Y, Z. But for the most part, that's where it ended. Not until this year did I take it a step further, where I said, if you have 3 or less tally marks underneath the sad face, basically 3 strikes, you're out. If you have 3 or fewer tally marks under the sad, then we get to move we have a palette. Each teacher has a little paint palette that has maybe, I think, 8 little dots on it. If they've had a good day, then they get to move their clip. It's like a little clothespin on their palette. When we get to the 8th really great day, we have an art party. So that's taken it to a whole nother level where it actually really resonates even more with them. It's not just marks on a happy sad board. Now they know what the marks can mean if they get them. And we keep our art parties really simple because I still have to teach. So it's usually like a 2-minute dance party at the end of class, or I actually have a spinning wheel that I wrote a bunch of rewards on it that are free and easy.
Yeah.
And so I usually pick a student to spin the wheel. And so it's like sit wherever you want. And no shoes art class. They absolutely are fascinated with taking their shoes off. I have no idea why. I did not know this was a thing. But if you need a reward for kids, no shoes art class is a deal. Like I said, dance song will play 20 questions at the end of class. Just a little game. Anything fast, free, and fun, but also doesn't interrupt my lesson. So yeah, that's like my number one thing that I would recommend to folks to try.
I love it. It makes all our points, and it's simple.
Yeah.
Laura always says, keep it simple, stupid, to me, which is not very nice, but it works. It does help us when we try to get bigger. I love that. I love it so much. Yeah. So this book, talk to us a little bit about the book and kind of how that came about.
So I, like I said, started teaching in 98. And when I started teaching, and I was just kind of thrown to the wolves, so to speak, because that's what it feels like when you're facing a class of like 25 kids who are just like staring at you like you're in charge. Yeah. I'm looking behind me like, who are they looking at? Because I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't think I should be in charge. You have to learn really fast. And so, like I said, in 98, it was either ask your colleagues or go to the library. And even at the library, I couldn't find anything back then. Even for art lessons, it was a lot of like crafts from the 1960s. Okay, I'm not going to sit and teach second graders how to do macrame. So what am I supposed to do? You know, there was a lot of just kind of figuring it out along the way, which I think is a really good thing. And unfortunately, I don't feel like people have to do that as much anymore because, like I mentioned, you can just get on blogs, or you can ask a social, an online community, which is great, but it also makes you not really find your own way. And I think that's a big part of it, especially if you're a creative person. It makes it kind of fun. And I think that I would always, after every class,
oh no.
Well, I would just, sorry.
You froze for half a second. Go ahead.
We panicked.
Instead of beating yourself up and just saying, oh, I did such a bad job with X, Y, Z, you have to stop and ask yourself, okay, so what could I do to change this? What isn't working? And what can I do tomorrow that will make it better? And I think that makes a massive difference, because I think a lot of times, if you're like me, and I think a lot of us, we are a lot alike. We think we are all alone in our thoughts and our feelings. But I think once you share them out, you realize, no, everybody kind of does this, which is like the hamster wheel replay loop that we all do.
Yeah.
You might have had a great day, but there was that one little morsel of an incident that happened with one student that really stuck with you like a tiny pebble in your shoe. And that's all you can focus on. So one thing I always force myself to do is just think, okay, how can I do something differently so that doesn't happen tomorrow, or at least it's a little bit better tomorrow. And so that's how ideas like the Happy Sad Board came to be. Happy Sad Board was actually really complicated when I first implemented it, because it would be like, I'd have sentence strips of all my expectations: walking quietly, sit quietly, listen correctly, follow directions. It was like this probably 6 or 7 sentence strips that they had to earn a happy or sad for. It was way too complicated. And so when I threw all that out and just simplified it, it made more sense to me. It was something I could keep up with, and it made more sense to the kids. So knowing that there were no resources out there for the longest time, in 2012, I started blogging. I was mostly blogging for myself because I was going through a little bit of a burnout. And I felt like I was doing a lot of the same old lessons that weren't very exciting for me. And when you're teaching something that's not exciting for you, you can't teach it in an exciting way. You become like the Charlie Brown teacher, because that's how the lesson makes you feel. So that's how you're teaching it. That's how the kids are going to feel, right? Knowing that I was kind of stuck in that place, I thought, well, what if I start a blog where I hold myself accountable, where once a week I have to come up with an original lesson, just one grade level, even out of the 5 that I teach, I was only like, just do one that's original and different and fun. And I told myself I also had to share what I was creating, because at that time I wasn't creating. And I think that a lot of people think that only art people or art teachers are creatives. No. We're all creative, whether it be gardening, baking, getting dressed, whatever you do. And it was important for me to kind of make sure I was doing that. And then also once a week, I was going to share my outfits because I like to dress kind of crazy. And so that really helped me get re-energized again. And then the benefit was I found a community of people who kind of enjoyed reading those things, started doing those lessons in their classrooms. And that was just kind of like the jumping off point. That wasn't the reason I started blogging. It was all really to hold myself accountable. But that made it so I could connect with a bunch of art teachers. Fast forward to, I guess, a couple of years ago, I decided to put all of my ideas into a book, because I would get a lot of emails like, please help me. I don't know how to manage a class. And I was responding and really having to write out a lot of emails or, share a lot of video links to videos that I had posted on YouTube. And I just thought, boy, this would be a whole lot easier if I just had a book that I could say, look, here, everything Art Teacherin 101 is all in this book. Now, I had previously written 2 other books with a publisher, and they are more lesson-based books. One is called Stitch and String Lab for Kids, which has 40 plus weaving, sewing, fibers projects in it. And then I have another one called Clay Lab for Kids, which has 52 clay projects in it. So I kind of had some experience with writing, taking photos of it, and making sure it kind of all made sense and it flowed. This time I decided to just kind of go it on my own without a publisher, because I had a feeling I wouldn't be able to get a publisher to kind of buy in that there would be a big enough audience. And I also just kind of wanted to do it my way. And so that's why I wrote it. And yeah,
I'd
and
say
you can find it on anywhere that you can find me. There's usually a link to find the book. So
All
sorry,
right.
you.
Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was saying, I guess that worked for you to go out on a limb and publish for yourself, because it seems like it's wildly successful. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So I know one of the things that our art teacher has changed and started doing this year, and so I've adopted it, because when I do her class, then we just stick with the same thing. But she brings everybody to the center of the room first before she lets them go to their places. So she said that was a tip from you. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was another thing I learned really fast in my first year, when everybody would be sitting at a table or a desk. It was like this constant battle of them either being distracted by what was in front of them or their neighbors. So it was a constant like, hey guys, eyes up here, look at me. And then next thing you know, you're really having to turn flips to just really keep their attention. So I decided, even though at my first year I was in a very small portable, push the tables aside, which meant their work area was smaller, but we always started meeting on the floor. And then when I got a larger art space, it's just always been what I've done. This is kind of like our gathering place. We all come together, we sit on the floor, and we literally sit on the floor. I do not have a carpet. I just have little numbered spots on the floor because then they know exactly where to sit. And then they also don't get too close to one another, because a lot of times they were getting kind of, somebody's touching me, they're nudging me. So it really helped that they had kind of like their own separate space. We meet on the floor. I have an open and close sign. So as soon as they walk in and sit down, I'll flip my sign to open. It's the same kind of sign you can see in a store window. When it says open, that means they're free to raise their hand and just share whatever they want to share or ask whatever they want to ask. So usually it's like, I lost a tooth. It was my birthday over the weekend. I got a new pair of socks, but I only take 3 comments before I flip my sign around. And if the comment gets a little too long-winded, I will just say, I'm going to stop you right there because we have art class. And so we'll have to talk more while you're working. So I usually take 3 comments, flip the sign around to closed. When it says closed, that means it's a listening and learning time only. So they can't raise their hand, and their job at that time is to listen. That is their job. My job is to teach. Your job is to listen. And I know that sometimes I catch some flack from, it's usually non-teachers who get upset with me for doing that. But honestly, if you have ever taught kids, they will talk forever.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they sometimes, the older kids will do that so that they can just keep, I mean, I remember doing that in high school. You all had those teachers where you're like, let's just get so-and-so off topic today so we don't have to do anything, you know?
Yeah.
So they learned that at a really young age. And then some of them just like to talk, which
Oh, yeah.
I love to have all the time in the world, but I have 30 minutes and I have a lesson I need to teach. And the reason I ask them not to raise their hand is also because that can be a distraction.
Yes.
If
Yes.
you're giving directions and they're like, well, what if, can I do that? Nope. You're not allowed to ask any of those questions because you're probably going to hear me answer them if you just let me speak. Like, we know this. I'm preaching to the choir here. But they do also know that they have, if there's blood, if I'm about to be sick or I have to go pee, those qualify as emergencies. Raise your hand and say my name. That way I know it's serious. Raise your hand and say my name. So that helps me out a lot. After I take those 3 comments, we say my art class catchphrase, which I'll say, hello, my most amazing artist. They respond with,
hello, my most amazing artist.
and we're so fortunate that at my school, we have and a lot of ASL instructors here. So they've taught us how to not only say it, but sign it. They'll respond to me, hello, my most amazing art teacher. I say, how are you? They say, ready to create. And then we just all join in and say a little mantra, I guess you could say, together. And then from there, I usually give the kind of our objectives for the day. Today, I can do this. One thing I really like, if I was on a deserted island and I could only take like 3 classroom management tools, one would definitely be the happy sad board. One would be the open and close sign. And then the third is something not even physical. The third is call and response. I cannot encourage people to use call and response enough. Like, I almost use it so much that it's almost like a tick, I would say, it's like a knee-jerk thing. And I always introduce it to everybody, usually kindergarten, because my older kids they know about it. But I introduce it to kindergarten by saying, okay, I'm going to clear my throat. After I clear my throat, you are going to say and do whatever I say and do. And then I go, ahem, and then immediately they go, ahem, and then they pause and they wait. And then I'll just say, today I'm going to, and then if I pause, they know to repeat it. And that's how I usually review the directions. I review what they need to go get supply-wise. I even review cleanup procedures. And then the moment, people will often ask me, how do they know when to stop repeating after you? They know because my voice changes. It's almost like they just sense it instinctually. Now, sometimes the 4th graders, they think they're going to be funny and they're just going to continue repeating. And I'll just kind of give them a look like, we're done repeating, right? But usually it's like the kindergartners and the younger kids, they can hear it and then they just automatically stop. But that really helps retain all the information I just threw at them. So those are my 3 like deserted island classroom management go-to things.
I love it. I love the deserted island. thing that you
It's like
said.
you speak our language. You
I know. So I will say this. I have watched you enough to know that your face, your body language, the students are all engaged. And I have done some of the things I've seen you done, and it completely changes the classroom. Because if I'm using a voice like you're talking about, the kids love that. They're automatically drawn to me. And I do a lot of the sign language, and I'll repeat a sign and they'll know that sign, and just they don't want to miss you. And I think you are so full of life, and you're so engaging. And what I was picking up on this, a lot of this stuff is work on the front end, but then the reward is for the rest of the year. We have learned these techniques, and so the year goes smoother. Not that you don't have ups and downs, but I'm just thinking all the planning is in. You know what you're going to do. The kids know what you're going to do, and that makes that much better. So anyway, I have to ask, because I know we were on classroom management, but I have to ask, you sew your own clothes, correct?
A lot of them. Yes, a lot of them. I've actually slowed down quite a bit, I have a group of fourth grade girls who harass me about that daily. Like, did you sew this weekend, Miss Stevens? Did you make that outfit? Because if you store bought it, then that's cheating. So yes, I think I do. I sew a lot, or I thrift a lot of clothing.
Yeah. And it's so unique to you, and so you, but that is one of the, and Laura knows this, and it was from you that I started dressing up for lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother sewed, so I would, the big skirts and that, when you were talking about being in a rut, Laura and I really decided that we too were in a rut, and we needed to let our creativeness out. And I think that is what a lot of educators, especially now, need to find a way to help other educators and to be creative and all those things. But you really inspired me to really up my game after I started following you. But
one thing I feel like I'm so passionate about is that, I spoke about earlier how I think people think creative people are, you paint or you draw. Like everybody thinks that that's one specific niche, but that's just like a small aspect of creativity. And I think that when I, as an educator, we all go through burnout multiple times, sometimes multiple times throughout a day. You're just like, I can't do this anymore. Like we've all been there. Anybody who tells you they've never had burnout before is a big fat liar. But one of the things that happened to me, like the first time I was like, I don't think I can keep doing this, was probably maybe about 10 years into teaching. I was really enjoying it, but I was starting to get kind of bitter because I was spending all of my time working on lessons, working on visuals, reading every book I could, because I felt like I just wanted to be as good a art teacher as I could possibly be. But you can't, what do they say? You can't pour from an empty cup. It's true. You just cannot. And I would get even more agitated because I'm like, I'm spending all this energy to be the best that I can be. And yet I'm not. I know I'm not, because I'm not feeling excited. I'm just not enjoying it like I used to. And what I realized was that I needed to be creating. And that can take on so many different looks, shall we say, like I said, baking, gardening, sewing, whatever, if you had a free day all to yourself, no children, no husband, no interruptions, what would be the one creative outlet that you would do? That's the thing that sparks you joy. That's your creative outlet. And once I realized that I needed to get back to creating, because what I was experiencing, that bitterness, that empty, weird feeling, it was a creative deficiency. If you don't take your vitamins, you feel kind of funky, kind of droopy, not yourself, not your best. You're experiencing a vitamin deficiency. I was going through like a creative withdrawal. Like I dried up creatively, and it was just showing in my attitude and just like my teaching attitude. And it was tough. So when I realized that that's what I had to get back to doing, things started to change. Now, it wasn't easy because I had stopped creating for 10 years. Here I had been so passionate about painting in college. And then I decided I had to force all that passion into teaching because I thought that's how you're going to become a good teacher. That when I went back to creating, it was like the well was dry. And I thought, well, I left off with painting. So if I just pick up the brushes again, the passion will come back. I was no longer interested in it. And then I spent all this time kind of beating myself up that I was no longer interested in that thing. Once I was like, why don't we just go to Joann's and stop judging yourself and just get something that just you're interested in? And so I did that, and I picked up like a quilting kit, like one of those pre-cut, all the pieces were cut, you just had to sew it together. My mom had given me a sewing machine 2 years prior that I was afraid to take out of the box, even though I begged for it, I took it home and no judgment. I just started putting together this really pretty ugly fabrics, but I just learned how to sew. And I discovered that this was something I had wanted to do because I'd always liked fashion. And so once I kind of let go of the idea that I had to be painting, because that's what I was passionate about, and just kind of followed my instincts, I became a lot happier. And one thing that I always want to encourage people to do, and like I said, I don't think this is just for art teachers, is if you can take what you're passionate about, what your creative outlet is, we'll say, you can take that creative outlet and think about how it can come into your teaching world, it'll be really inspiring for you. So I like to think of teaching and creating as two paths. So the end result of a creating path is whatever you've created. The end result of your teaching path is a successful lesson. If you can get those two paths to run parallel, then they might each be able to reach a destination at the same time. For example, if I'm teaching a lesson on Vincent van Gogh, I know that I want my kids to make maybe a Vincent van Gogh inspired oil pastel drawing, let's say, and that's my path, and my end result is a successful lesson.
Right.
Then I'm like, what can I be creating at home? So I have needle felted a Starry Night dress. And so I started working on that at home. And while I was needle felting the dress, I would get more ideas about the lesson and how I would share it with students. And when I was prepping on the lesson, I would get ideas about the outfit I was going to create. And I was so excited. And then when I was able to wear the dress in front of the kids and talk about Van Gogh, I was so much more enthusiastic and inspired by it or about it because I was able to have both cups filled. I was creatively filled and I was teaching wise filled. Now, not every lesson goes that way. I don't make a dress or an outfit for each. The times when I'm off creating something out here and, no man's land, but yet I have a lesson I want to teach on something different, I can tell that I'm just not into it on either path. So when they're running perpendicular, I can feel it. If I can try to align them a little bit, even if you just make like a little hair clip, or you just make something like a tiny earring or a pin that you're going to wear, even if it's small, or if you're like a gardener, you're growing flowers and you bring those in, or bake cookies and you talk about the ingredients with your students. Any way you can kind of bring those together, I think that it really helps. It helps me. And so it may help somebody else out there. That was very long-winded and I apologize.
Oh, it was perfect. It
was so perfect. We needed to hear it. We totally get it because it resonates with us and where we were when we started when we started using both the paths. And so we totally get that. And so that's so neat. But I know we have kept you and you've been at school all day, but Laura, I know you have a couple of questions before we let her go.
I have two more questions.
No rush.
So, hearing you talk about this and, that you go the extra mile and you do the extra things for someone that may be in an environment where that's frowned upon, or they may feel, I know Ron Clark has talked about it, how there are sometimes the jealous teachers out there. what advice would you give to somebody that wants to step out and go the extra mile and do these things, but may be met with some contention in the school?
Yeah, that's tough because, I'm the only art teacher here. So it's not like I have another art teacher who might not feel the same vibe. For the classroom teachers, I know that can be a little bit more difficult because things can be a little maybe funky. I don't know. One thing for me is that maybe because I'm older, I don't really think too much about what other people think. And I think that's a lot of the comments or questions I get, like, I'd like to dress that way, but I'm worried what people will think. Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the kids and it's about you enjoying teaching those kids. And if dressing differently isn't for you, that's fine. But if it's something you're interested in, then life is so short. Why not try it if you're interested in it? One thing I will say is don't expect other people though to be interested in it. If you're interested in it and your team or teammates have always taught the same lesson the same way and that's how they enjoy doing it, then let them do that thing. And then hopefully they'll understand to let you do your thing. But I say just kind of go for it and try it and just see, why not? What harm will it do? But I really do think that a lot of times we focus on what other people might think of what we're doing. And I honestly think a lot of times, and I say this to people aren't thinking about you because they're too busy thinking about themselves. So don't worry about it. You just do the thing, So that would be my word of advice. Just go for it.
Great advice.
Perfect advice. That is absolutely perfect. Wonderful.
Okay. My other one is counselors do different, like some counselors are in a rotation where they meet with students every week. Others may go in once a month. So when you're thinking about some of these routines and practices, is there anything that you would tell someone that goes in like once a month that may be different from someone that meets with students weekly?
I feel like maybe some of the things that I shared are so simple and so visual that I think that you could still take those in. Even if you were seeing the kids pretty infrequently, and I'm assuming if they push into a classroom, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
I mean, my little happy sad board is literally, I know they can't see, but it's literally like just a little tiny dry erase board. And that could just be, or even a clipboard, that you could have a slick surface clipboard that they could even use. So I don't know. I would kind of use those same kind of tricks. I also think, like we spoke about earlier, that if you can't use those kind of things, or that just doesn't feel like your vibe. Like I feel like if somebody's hearing these things, they're like, "Oh, I don't like that idea," then don't do it. Don't do it, or try a different way that you think that would work better. But I honestly think that your voice, and we talked about this earlier, your voice is your most powerful tool, and so. A lot of times people will say to me, how can you be so animated all the time? I'm not, y'all, I'm not. When I'm teaching, it's, your voice is kind of like a roller coaster. You bring it up when you want to engage the kids, but when maybe they're getting a little too engaged or you want to get more serious, then you bring your voice down. You slow down your diction, you take deeper breaths, and you just kind of go about it really slowly. That's what I'll do if a class is maybe at a 10 or maybe even a little too high and I really want them to bring it back down. Another thing I would recommend is something called palming, which I learned from a book that I read one of my first years of teaching. This book was like my art teacher and Bible. It's called Drawing with Children by Mona Brooks. And she talks about how students should take their hands and then rub their hands together very slowly, getting them kind of warm. And then as she counts from 1 to 3, speed up how you are rubbing your hands together. So by 3, children are rubbing their hands together pretty rapidly and the palms of their hands are nice and warm. And then when you say 3, they take the warm palms of their hands and then place them over their eyes and then just kind of put their arms into their chest and lean forward. And then just keep them there, keep their hands on their eyes as you very slowly and calmly tell them the expectations you have when they put their hands back in their lap. So for example, I would say, when I say 3, you're going to take your hands off of your eyes. And I speak really slowly when I do this. Put your hands in your lap, and we're going to listen very closely to the directions, and we're going to sit so quietly and, just kind of go through very quickly the expectations and then count to 3, and you'll be amazed at the change of the mood. So I would recommend anybody giving that a try, especially if you're coming into a classroom. The kids are just now transitioning. They know the counselor's here. We just got out of recess, or we're just coming back from lunch, and we are wild and crazy because we have somebody new in the building or new in the room. Yeah. We smell blood in the water, and we're going to see what we get away with. I would say, okay, if you're wearing glasses, take them off. If you have on your pretend glasses, put them on your desk, and then do the palming activity. And then I think from there, it's almost like a total change of shift in mood that you'll be able to see and feel.
Such great advice.
So amazing.
So practical.
I've often wondered how you have time for everything that I see you do. I mean, I see these wonderful, and I know what you said, well, I'm getting to see the best of the best, but it's still a lot. It is so much. So you're obviously highly energetic, I'm assuming. And, but how do you fit everything in?
Well, I have this magical ability to start a lot of things, start a lot of tasks,
I'm glad
start a lot of videos, start a lot of stuff. And then I don't finish them for a very long time. And then one day I just get this wild hair. I finish something and everybody's like, oh my gosh, she just pulled that right out of her behind. How did she do it? It's magic. It's all smoke and mirrors. I also am not really into cleaning my house. And I do drink a lot of coffee. So those are kind of like
helps you go.
Yes.
I gotcha. Well, before we go, I will say, if you will allow me, and we'll get off before I do this, but I want to call my sister and surprise her because I want to see what my reaction. Yeah. We don't have to do it right now, but
you do it. I say go for it.
Should I do it right now?
Do it right now. Let's do this.
Okay. I'm sorry. You wouldn't expect all this.
Well, for once, I'm glad you don't read your email because this has been a fun surprise.
It has been such a fun surprise. I am so glad. I really would have been freaking.
Yeah, I would encourage more people not to read their email.
I'm going to FaceTime you. I've got my best friend on, and she wants to say hey to you. Can you see Christy?
Hi, Christy.
Oh my goodness.
Hi.
My art teacher. She's out here. Well, there you go, Christy. That's your little birthday present.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
I know. I have to tell you, my sister just says, do you know how much happiness you bring to
thank you.
She said, thank you. So anyway, that was her little gift. But thank you so much for coming on. We want all of our school counselors to get this book and watch you, follow you, all that wonderful stuff, because I have learned, you'll learn more than you will in the college course.
And you have a podcast too. So
yeah, I do. I haven't probably recorded for about a year, but there's a lot of episodes on there where I talk about different things like classroom management and stuff like that. But yeah, I do. And I have a YouTube channel where there's a lot of videos. Some of them are videos of me teaching. A lot of them are videos with art lessons on them, which I create those so I don't have to repeat myself 27 times in my art room, but also in case other art teachers are interested, they're more than welcome to use them also. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just so honored that you would say yes to join us on the podcast. And you are so much school counselor. Like, I think you are a lot art teacher, but you got so much school counseling in you. Because
thank you. Thank you guys. It was so much fun.
Thank you.
Oh my word. Could you have embarrassed me any more than you did?
I now, looking back, am embarrassed,
Okay.
but at the time, I couldn't help it. I could not help it.
Well, I'm just glad that it was just a FaceTime call, because what Cassie doesn't know is you live on the compound with your whole family. They all could have piled into that room and been looking at her in person, and that would have been more embarrassing.
My sister is as big a fan as I am, and I was texting her like, be ready, I've got a surprise for you. And as I told you, this could have been my Christmas present, that you could have, you know, wrapped this up and said, Merry Christmas, here's our guest. So, but it's so funny that I don't think we do listen to each other, because I talk about her all the time and you're not putting together, and you're telling me who the guest is and I'm not putting it together. So it came together, which I would not change a second of it. I wouldn't take it. It was just a great surprise that somebody, and it's so funny that we as educators, it's like my Elvis. She's like my Elvis.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if I had a bra on, I would throw it at the computer, you know.
I'm editing that out. I'm editing that out. It's so embarrassing. As if you haven't embarrassed me enough. Then you go talking about your undergarments. Oh my gosh. Cassie Stephens, she is going to get a restraining order, yet another restraining order to add to our scrapbook after this episode.
Another person. And what's so funny is that my child, my special needs child, I leave him lessons every day, all day. I mean, he has every hour of his day is full of activities. And one of those activities is the art lessons. And so he hears her and he's coming on with his hearing aid, and he's hearing her and he goes, well, my art teacher. So anyway.
Yeah, that was a fun surprise. So I'm glad it worked out that way. It was a great episode. So,
well, you know, I love hard, Laura. You know, I love hard.
You do.
I mean, I do. I am a passionate person. And when I am, but there's so few people that I really put up on that pedestal. And she is, as educators go, she's one of them. And so I had to gush. I take back my remorse. I would gush more if she was owning. So put all her links. I want all the school counselors to fall in love with her.
Yes.
As we have.
All right. Well, you can follow us, but you'd be much better off following Cassie Stephens. So just follow her. In this episode, I'm just going to say, don't follow us. Just follow Cassie Stephens. You can find us on Facebook. I'm sure you can find her on Facebook. You can find her more places than you can find us, and it'd be a better use of your time. So just follow Cassie Stephens.